It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
A little light looks through her bedroom window.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, Happy New Year. 2019 is just about over with as of this recording. And we're going to be seeing things 2020 here coming up. It's the new year upon us, and that music that you've been listening to here as we came into the podcast is our old buddy, our old pal, Todd Park Moore, with Big Head Todd and the Monsters and Bittersweet. And that kind of sums up 2019 and kind of where we're at right now for 2020. It's been bittersweet indeed. I look back on the podcast. Our first full year was last year, of course. And, a lot of it was spent with politics, obviously. We're coming up to these Iowa caucuses, these all-important elections in November of 2020. And there was a lot of news to talk about. We spent a long time talking about the Mueller report. And my God, what a disappointment that was. What a dud, D-U-D, dud, the Mueller report was. We waited months for this guy, this former FBI spook. Robert Mueller, the guy that had told us that weapons of mass destruction were a danger domestically, and therefore he supported us going to war in Iraq. That guy. Everybody seemed to forget that, but he came out with this report, and he had nothing. There was nothing there. He said, when asked specifically, no conspiracy with the Russians to overthrow anyone's election by anybody in the Trump campaign, nobody indicted, nobody arrested, and then they tried to get Trump on obstruction. And they asked Mueller specifically, did he obstruct your investigation? Nope. So anyway, the Mueller report was matter of fact, here's what I think of the Mueller report. It was a dud, folks, and they got right off of one lame-ass horse onto another one with this Ukraine gate thing. And I'm not a Trumpy. I'm not supporting Trump. I want that guy out of there in the worst way. But they come out with Ukraine gate, this phone call to this former comedian in Ukraine, the place that has neo-Nazis in its military, the country that Barack Obama wouldn't give bombs and missiles to. He didn't want any part of them. Trump denies the bombs and missiles and says something about Joe Biden, and oh my God, our democracy is under attack. The world is about to end, and they're going to impeach him on that. And so Ukraine gate results in an impeachment that goes nowhere. It's going into the Senate. They're going to have a little bit of a trial there. Maybe it'll go to the Senate. And of course, he's not going to be convicted. In the meantime, the earth burns. Climate change is just getting worse. The climate crisis is all about us. And that's what I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about here in the new year. And it couldn't be more. Christmas Eve, I'm out walking around my neighborhood in a T-shirt. Folks, I live in a part of the world where it's supposed to be cold and snowing, and it used to be. But for many years now, this trend has come where it's getting colder later in the year. It's staying warmer. The winters are milder. They do tend to last a little longer in the spring, I think, but that's only because they start so late. And I'm walking through my neighborhood, walking down the street, and these guys go roaring by on Harleys. There's a climate change indicator for you. People riding around on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, of course, with the pipes wide open like they always do. God, that pisses me off. On Christmas Eve, these beer-gutted, badass guys riding their Harley-Davidson motorcycles probably got six-shooters strapped to their asses riding down the street. And right after them will come a guy in a four-wheel drive pickup. These things are all over the place. They're big enough to go up the side of Mount Kilimanjaro with. They could haul 55 human beings in them. They're so powerful. The engines are so huge. And they're going nowhere. What? To the dollar store? Come on. Right after they go by me, there's a kid on a bicycle, a kid on a skateboard that's going to end up at the same place that they are, maybe just a few minutes later. And in the meantime, the earth is burning up. Well, anyway, it's been a bittersweet year. It's the Mueller investigation, sweet. Bitter that it didn't amount to anything. The impeachment, sweet. They're finally going to get this Trump bum. Bitter. It didn't amount to anything. And then Tulsi Gabbard, my God, how more bittersweet can you get than that? Roundly pilloried by Hillary. Pilloried by Hillary, accused of being a Russian asset. This woman that has done 3 tours overseas. She's a veteran in the Army. She's a major in the Army. She's devoted her entire adult life to serving the United States of America, a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and gets nothing but criticism. And the most recent, of course, has to do with her censure vote instead of impeachment. And I've tried to explain this to folks, and it's not that difficult to understand. Tulsi Gabbard took a look at this like the only adult in the room and said, hey, this isn't going to accomplish anything. You know that he'll be impeached in the Democratic House on a highly partisan basis. Every Democrat will vote for it, basically. Every Republican will vote against it. It'll go to the Senate, which is controlled by the Republicans. Therefore, he won't be convicted. And what happens in the interim? What happens in the meantime? Think. T-H-I-N-K, to quote the great Aretha Franklin. Here's what happens. Trump grows stronger. He gets higher approval ratings. His poll numbers go up. His strength against the Democratic field increases. Tulsi Gabbard says, my God, I'm trying to defeat the man. So's the rest of the Democratic field, by the way. I don't want to strengthen his hand heading into November. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's exactly what did happen. She also realizes that it's only going to widen the divide in America. My God, we are at each other's throats. She's going around the country, meeting in every sidewalk, cafe, and living room, trying to get elected. She talks to Americans every day, everywhere. She knows this is a reality and says, forget about this. Censure the dude and move on. And I've had people say, well, the censure won't do anything. Well, how about impeachment? Not only does it not do anything, it strengthens Trump's hand. It's counterproductive. But who gets criticized for it? The people that pursued impeachment, the Democrats? No. The only adult in the room, Tulsi Gabbard. Bittersweet. I'm telling you. I mean, it's sweet in the news now that the Washington Post, they got sucked in so mightily and so hard by Russiagate, I think because they depend upon their CIA sources so much for the reporting. I hope that's the case. I mean, that's one of the most benevolent reasons I can think of as to why they got sucked in on all this stuff. Anyway, they come out with the Afghanistan papers. Have you seen this? Have you read this? You should. This is the biggest news in this country since 9/11. It's the biggest news since the Iraq War. It may be the biggest news since the Vietnam War. We got hosed again. We got lied to again. And thousands, hundreds of thousands, in the instance of Afghanistan civilians, have died because of this. And I don't know, $1 trillion American bucks. I mean, you can't believe the blood and treasure that's been spent by this country in Afghanistan. And of course, one candidate has been speaking about this at every campaign stop for over a year. Tulsi Gabbard. Does she get any credit for this? Does she get any love at all from the media? No, none whatsoever. Check out the Afghanistan papers. Okay, that's bittersweet. That's my kind of wrap-up, kind of a quick little bow on 2019. And looking ahead at 2020, I'm going to talk about something here that you would never have thought. I know you couldn't have guessed this in a million years. Cue the band. That music that you're listening to is from the movie The Exorcist. And what would that have to do with the new year, and why would we have this on here now? Well, it's because The Exorcist came out almost this exact time in 1973. It was basically a New Year's Eve release. That movie, and most people have seen it by now, I would think, Linda Blair and The Exorcist. And I wanted to close with a kind of a bittersweet, a mostly sweet story about my buddy Joe. And I hope you're going to like this as a way to take out the old and bring in the new. Okay, it's 1973. It's this time of year. The Exorcist movie comes out. I'm at a house party with some buddies, and we're drinking beer, and my God, we're young. Most people were just barely 18. I don't even know if I was yet, but we're at this house party, and I'm wanting to meet girls and do the things that all 17, 18-year-old guys do, and I'd pretty much run the course through the hometown girls. They didn't want anything more to do with me, and probably rightfully so. And here at this party are two girls. They're together. They're from out of town. Nobody knows who they are. Good-looking gals from some other city that don't know me, and therefore, for whatever reason, they're kind of smitten with me. They kind of like me. I've got this conversation going. This thing is working out here at this house party in the winter of 1973. But I'm thinking, I got to get another guy here so that we can get out of here and maybe go get another beer someplace else or get to know these girls better, get out of this party, because I kind of wanted them all for myself. Well, my buddy Joe is at this house party. And Joe would be perfect. Good-looking guy, athletic. I mean, he's on the basketball or the wrestling team and the football team. Joe would be perfect. Where's Joe? Well, Joe's down there. He's down at the end of the hall. Okay, girls, let's go down. Let's say these girls, let's say their names are Mary and Sue. Let's go down to the end of the hall, Mary and Sue, and go see my buddy Joe. We'll gather you up. We'll go somewhere and have some fun. So we go down to the end of the hall and knock on the door and push it open. And it's dark in this room. I mean, pitch black. And so to back up here a second, to kind of give you the background on this, Joe and I had just wrapped up the high school play. And Joe and I were pretty good. Matter of fact, Steve Alexander, I mean, if there was anything that we were good at, other than sports, we thought, it was probably as thespians in the high school play. And Joe had decided he was going to devote his life to being an actor, I think. And okay, so that's your background. We push this door open. And inside the room, laying on the floor, curled up in a fetal position by himself against the wall, is Joe. And he's going, Marin. And I, what? Marin. Honest to God. Well, if you remember, Marin was the Catholic priest that was trying to do the exorcism on Linda Blair. And Joe, for whatever reason, had decided that he was going to impress everybody with his acting abilities, and he was in full character. He playing Marin on the floor in this room. I mean, well, no, he wasn't Marin. He was Linda Blair. That's the character. Yeah, he was actually Linda Blair because he had snot all over himself. I mean, he was slobbering. He was doing his best Linda Blair there on the floor. And these girls took one look at him and took a second look at me, turned on their heels, walked out the door, and I never saw him again. Honest to God. That's a sweet memory with my buddy Joe. And, of course, it's a bittersweet story, as you've probably heard me say on the podcast before. Joe passed away probably almost 10 years ago, gone now, in a motorcycle accident. That's why one of the major reasons I don't like motorcycles. Out on a lonely stretch of interstate west of town, and I miss him all the time. I mean, he was a great guy. I'm showing some pictures here as we go through the end of the podcast of my buddy Joe, and that's a bittersweet story, thinking about years gone as we wrap up the new year and head into the new year in 2020. And I hope you'll be aboard. I hope you'll come along and check us out here, because the podcast is going to continue. But for right now, we're going to wrap it up. That's another podcast by George.